On Press TV. Let me start with London and Dr. Shahrar Ali. I'm sure, like many, you've been tuning in to Tony Blair giving his statements again. It was a long day, many hours. What did you make of it?
Well, it's great theatre, isn't it? But while some of us were looking for insights into Blair's psychology, I think what is already very clear is that he had his mind made up in the very early days, and despite representations, many of which were formal, others of which were informal, he was determined to pursue a fatal course of action, fatal insofar as it has cost hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of innocent Iraqi civilians have died since 2003 as a result of these warring interventions which were contrary to international law. So we heard Blair today express regret. Regret for what? Not for entering into this debacle which has cost lives, but for lives which have been lost. Well, that was inevitable. That was a consequence of him pursuing this course of action when the United Kingdom was not under an existential threat by any stretch of the imagination, and there was no WMD worthy of the name. In spite of his inspectors telling him that, he pursued this fatal course of action, and for that he must be subsequently tried in an international court. That is what we're asking for, War Crimes Tribunal, because he still has some years to go, and he is a menace to the international community if he is allowed to get away with it.
Okay.
Blair is an intelligent man, no doubt. One gets the impression that he's in self-preservation mode. He naturally probably even enjoys the limelight. But make no mistake, the spotlight really is on these hundreds upon hundreds, unprecedented level of civilian casualties who would have been alive today, most likely. You could argue that there might have been a different set of people who could have been killed in the hands of Saddam, and that is a reasonable point to make. But you cannot proceed on an international stage in this way when you have this kind of foreign invasion, essentially, going unchecked and unchallenged. To return to your point about the 9/11 context, and of course that will be used to try and justify these unprecedented actions. What has happened since 2001 is that these breed of terrorist organisations have actually been fuelled by this. And many of the neoconservatives themselves admitted that the prospect of an international or a terrorist action had become more likely, if not inevitable. So even on their own terms, these kind of warring actions are totally counterproductive. Moreover, to return to the point about international law being transgressed, we also have the Geneva Conventions. Remember Abu Ghraib. Think about Guantanamo Bay. Over 1 year beyond Obama's pledge to have closed it. It's still open. So we have these gross human rights violations which are causing resentment around the world. And Blair, again, is partially and in many cases solely responsible for many of these transgressions of human rights. There are many costs associated with Iraq, and Blair needs to be held to account. It is not about him preserving himself and his legacy.